Go ahead and call the House Transportation Committee meeting to order. First, I want to thank Representative Croft for filling in for Representative Collins today. Thank you, Majority Leader. And I want to thank everybody else that took time off this afternoon to be here today. I know some people have a very important appointment at 2 o'clock. I appreciate you staying as long as you can. I really want to make sure that we have a robust conversation, but do remember that really you only have to watch the last 10 minutes of the event that starts at 2 o'clock to see all the exciting stuff.
I have two things at 2 o'clock. So
That's right.
My son playing in a subtotal in Wichita at 2.
Oh.
And my university playing in.
So should I go get you some headphones so you can put one in one ear?
And leave here, I'm going
okay.
to end up on the radio
All right.
and watch it on the high school TV.
So today we're going to have an informational hearing on some of the modal projects that are happening across the state transit. I know Kansas City metro area has some very exciting things going on. You know, they have a new airport. There's new projects, you know, at DeSoto that we continue to hear about. So I thought this would be a good time. Again, I didn't really realize what was going to be the competitive events at 2 o'clock today when I scheduled this. But I hope we have a robust discussion. And if you have questions about the future of transit in the Kansas City metro area, you can have your questions answered. So with that, the presentation for the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority will be done by Frank White III. He's the president and CEO. Welcome to the committee, Frank.
Okay. I went to K-State.
As did I. Did we catch you in your first lie today?
Yeah, that is a lie. I'm a proud Jayhawk. I stopped in Lawrence on the way up here. I had a burger at Jefferson's before I came here for my strength. So ready for this ready for you, Representative Francis. I had to be ready. So
all right.
Thank you very much. Again, like I said, my name is Frank White III, CEO of the KCATA. Going to do an overview basically of who we are, what we do, kind of how we're funded, some of the projects that are going on in KC, stuff we're working on, and then I'll close out with a overview of some of the concepts of rail that could possibly be done in the region as well. So to start with the first slide here, I want everybody to remember, if you don't remember anything when I leave here today, that the KCATA is really an economic development agency that operates transit. We make things happen. We have what we call our 4 pillars of access to education, employment, healthcare, and housing, all flows through transportation. In many presentations I've given, I said, basically, in the human body, if the blood doesn't flow right, the body doesn't flow right. So we also, if we don't have a great public transportation system, cities and regions don't flow right. And the great cities of the world have great public transportation systems. And we claim to be a great region, to be a competitive region. We have to make those investments in our public transit systems in all modes of transit, not just one. So for those who do not know, the ATA was created by Congress in 1966 through a federal compact. We cover 7 counties on both sides of the state line. On the Missouri side, it's Cass, Clay, Platte, and Jackson. For our purpose today in Kansas, we cover Leavenworth, Wyandotte County, and Johnson County as our service area. So due to those compact powers, we can on paper operate any mode of transportation in facilities and buildings. So that could be airports, buses, bikes, rail, streetcar, whatever you have it. Also within that compact, we have some tools that allow us to do economic development, so what we call transit-oriented community projects. So we can do condo bond financing. We can do land condemnation, land usage. We do sales tax exemptions on construction materials as well. So there's something to do with our compact powers that makes us very unique, because we also fall on the Interstate Commerce Clause, meaning that we can cross jurisdictional lines in those 7 counties, so we can be more efficient in stitching our community together as well. Next slide, please. So how we just wanted to put the slide in, just kind of saying how we're funded. We get asked a question a lot. You know, we don't have taxing authority, so we have kind of complicated ways of getting funding. One is sales taxes. So in Kansas City, Missouri, there are 2 sales taxes the voters passed to fund public transportation. Also, we can do community contracts. So we might do, let's say, at Raytown, Missouri, or in Johnson County, for example, there is a contract with the county that we use as well. We also do a lot of stuff with federal grants. That's the bulk of our stuff for our capital projects, our buses, our facilities, federal grants. We also do stuff with private grants also with the foundations. And also at the state level, we do appropriations. So in Missouri, we've got about a $4 million request in for planning and implementation, and also for safety and security. We are fairly new to Kansas. Well, we've been around for many years. Our previous people didn't really do a lot in the state of Kansas. So this is my second time to speak in the last 30 days. And you'll probably hopefully see more of us throughout the county as well, Leavenworth, Johnson, and Wyandotte. We're very, very active to make sure that we're visible and working with our community partners and stakeholders to maximize the power of this authority. So next slide, please. So one thing that we try to emphasize is, like I said before, we're an economic development agency that happens to operate transit, and we have to move people. Economic Development 101 says when you build something, the first question is, where's your labor going to come from? Too often, people don't think of transit as infrastructure. We like to think that we are infrastructure, like lights, facilities, water, architecture. So if you build at the beginning, you don't have to plan for at the end. So, for example, Urban Outfitters in the UG, we were with them from day one on how do we make sure that they can get their workers to work, because when you look at workforce development and transportation, it's really about 3 to 5% of your workers will need public transportation. But it's those workers that are essential, from custodians to maintenance to your third shift, that if they can't get there, you can't get your product out. So we try to say we bake it in at the beginning. You don't have those issues trying to have those things like we have in Cass County at one point, where they built Chewy and all these different facilities, and they said we need transit. But it's like, well, you kind of did this backwards. So with Urban Outfitters, from day one, we got involved with Wyandotte County, found ways to actually came to Topeka, met with them, who was the Commerce Secretary told at the time, to talk about, how do we carve out, like say a CID or something, to make sure that there's ways to fund transit for the long haul and not just for a short period of time. And it's been a success story for us. We are currently having intimate discussions with Panasonic on getting people out to the Panasonic plant. It's always a slightly more of a challenge in a greenfield environment, only because there's no infrastructure for transportation. But we've got a meeting with Doug Bach yesterday, so we probably got 4 or 5 different options we can present. We've presented to Panasonic, and they can decide which way they want to go. Because even though it is in Kansas, Panasonic is a regional project because the labor shed stretches so wide. We want to make sure that we've got ourselves involved. Johnson County, Lawrence, even Topeka are going to play a part in that space as well. And so we also have a pilot we're working on in Lenexa to get folks who are transitioning out of, I guess we'd call rough situations, needing a fresh start, through what we call microtransit, and trying to piece us together. So we're going to be meeting with Mr. Kelly and possibly Josh Powers of Johnson County Transit to kind of put together another pilot as well. So next slide, please. So a lot of the stuff that we're really good at is that we do major events very well. We've got, obviously, the airport is open. We're leading a study with the Mid-America Regional Council right now on how we try to get more efficient transportation. We have a new product called Iris. We're doing City of Kansas City, Missouri. It's a microtransit project that will help kind of fill in those gaps. It's also being used in Wyandotte County as well as Johnson County. And I believe the ks.gov guys behind me are going to speak more to this, but there's going to be another microtransit pilot starting in Leavenworth County in 2 weeks, which will be the first project they've ever done in the 55 years with the ATA. So we're making those headways there. Also, we had the NFL draft, Super Bowl parade, excuse me. If you saw that 2 weeks ago, and that's where we basically put park and ride systems, moved over 70,000 people in one day with the many people in Kansas City. And we're kind of the rock stars of the city right now because it was so seamless and efficient, a testament to people we have at the KCATA. In fact, the NFL called our chief operating officer, Chuck Ferguson, to basically say, could we scale that for the draft in April? We do have a draft plan for the NFL. It's going to be more increased max lines linked in for East-West corridor service, as well as linked to the streetcar. We proposed parking rides, or Chuck proposed parking rides, I should say, and they did not want them at the time, but now they saw how well they worked. They now want to have that done for us in April. So we've done that well. Also, we are now meeting with the KC Sports Commission on World Cup planning. So you're going to be looking again more of a park and ride concept, more buses, even using we call the mega coach buses as far north as Iowa, Nebraska, south as Wichita, that we'll be coordinating, as well as looking at doing some slight infrastructure work into Arrowhead to have one way in for ride share for bus and one way out. Because then at the Qatar games, the big issue was after the games are over, it was just chaos getting people out. So we're trying to work with the chiefs, City of Kansas City, Missouri, to make sure that we have one way in, one way out on some of those events. So that's some of the stuff we're doing. Like I said, Panasonic is the one that keeps us the busiest because that's the one, obviously, the largest economic development project state of Kansas. You got to get people there. So next slide, please. That's just a bus. So we were asked to talk about a commuter rail concept, and we actually are responding to a notice of funding opportunity from the FTA on the concept of rail. It's a study grant that we're trying to apply for. It's 100% no federal match to see what could we do with rail. It's an intercity grant, meaning we're looking at Kansas City from the east side of Missouri, as far west as Topeka, as far south as Wichita. Could we create a rail system that could be effectively used? Now, rail has its challenges. One is going to be the fact that federal match is 50-50, so it's going to be a higher bar to reach. The question of density, is there enough bodies on the rail line? And then also, do you have 30 years worth of funding to pay for this rail? And the most important piece is, can you get the cooperation of the rail companies to let you use the rail lines? So those are just, I want to put that out there just to kind of manage expectation. But this is just what it looked like. Next slide, please. So this is how we looked at it on this map for connections, obviously on the Kansas side, from the KCI to KCK, Leavenworth, Legends. Even there's a line out to DeSoto. It's a line that is, I'm not sure if it's active or dead line, but it's something that we conceptually looked at. So next slide, please. So these are the potential corridors. Like existing freight line would be the best way to go. Also, there might create new track or greenfield right away within that. But it's really, again, what's there. But this is part of our grant proposal to see if we can study it. Next slide, please. And these are some of the ways you could possibly fund it through federal programs. So we talk about infrastructure, the ACT, the RIF loans, and also with New Start, Small Starts through the FTA, the TIFIA program as well through Build America, and also we call TOC or Transit Communities. There's ways you can do it because the permanence of rail really spurs more development. You see with streetcar, people like the permanence of it. It's going to be there as well. You kind of, our country was built on rail, so you kind of go backwards or go forward sometimes. Next slide, please. And then, like I said, these are rail funding sources. So basically with the KCHA, we can issue bonds. So we could actually, in theory, bond out the project ourselves to help pay for it. There's also some options through KDOT, which I'm not committing KDOT right now. I just want to let you guys know that. It's just for presentation purposes, it could be an option to fund rail from the area. So next slide. And that is my presentation. I want to kind of keep it fairly high level for you guys and answer any question you may have.
Representative Hobson.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. I have a two-part question. You just talked about the rail line between Kansas City trying to connect to Wichita. Mm-hmm. Will that be an example of a high-speed rail transportation between the two cities, or are you planning on doing it just stopping several cities before it gets to Kansas City?
Well, the concept we're going to propose is just high-speed rail.
High-speed, okay.
To study. So yeah.
Okay. And again, what is the timeline per se as to when everything might be finished in terms of study and all of that?
Well, we're submitting for the grant. The 27th is when the grant is due. The grant proposals are due. So once we get that, if we get notice of approval, the study for about maybe 6 months. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you talk a little bit more detail about what it is you're doing in Leavenworth and how that's funded, and is it expansible?
Yeah, it's what's called microtransit. So it's basically it works in zones. So let's just say Leavenworth is a zone representative, and so anytime within that zone, it's an app-based system. If you don't have an app-based one, you can also call a customer service center to get a ride. So with anything within a zone should be like a 15 to 20-minute wait. Anything with that zone in Leavenworth, and at that point, it can be scalable. That's really a function of what the city wants. Well, because KDOT is really the one funding it at this point through their funds, but we're doing it in Kansas City quite a bit, Wyandotte County, and also I know it's really tied into Medicare, Medicaid, and I don't know a lot about it. we just found out about it because again, it's through KDOT, and we've been invited. We've met with Vicki Kaz, our commissioners, asked us to come be involved in it. We're doing some back end work on it, but I would defer to my friends at KDOT rather than tell you a lie. So is there something?
Representative Delperdane. Oh,
I was going to try to. Are you just going to? Okay. Thank you.
are you
They'll address it in their presentation.
okay? Representative Delperdane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, two questions if I could. It was either last year, maybe 2 years ago in this committee, we heard a bill that was looking at providing additional toll lanes along maybe I-70 or 435. I don't remember if that passed or
I
not.
think it's on Highway 69.
Was
There
it
were hotlines
69?
on. There was one where they were on the shoulder. They were using the shoulder for their right of
That was
way.
one on the buses, but then they were going to do some additional lanes that I thought were going to be set up for tolls, so that it was more of expressways.
That's the Highway 69
Just wonder if that
expansion.
started or if it's in any updates anybody
Uh,
have. And if you're
maybe
not aware
Joel-
of it, fine. But
He's not the right one, but Joel could give that, and they have let the bid.
Yeah.
And it's in process right now.
Okay.
Turnpike and KDOT are
Very good.
doing that together.
And second question, if I would, is there currently busing for students between Johnson County Community College and like KU?
Yeah, it's the K10 connector.
What is it?
The K10 connector. It runs from Johnson County. Transit operates that service. So it goes from Johnson Community College to KU as well.
So the students would show up at JCC.
Yes.
and
Or our park and ride in Lawrence. It's like a bigger coach buses.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a K10 connector.
everything's working out good with it. Is it
Oh yes, it's one of the most popular rides. Like I said, it's run through Johnson County Transit, but it's very, very successful.
excellent? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Representative Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions. One is, it seems like you like the rail. I love rail. I know rail existed before,
Mhm.
and then it went away. And so why did it fail before? And then what would maybe make it more successful this time?
You know, sometimes people can get too clever, Representative, and it works so good. Let's stop doing it. The idea was they felt buses were more flexible, easier, less cost. But as we find, people never stopped liking rail. Buses work. Again, we're mode agnostic. I'm a fan of rail. I just think rail's cool. I mean, I just think it's cool. There's no science behind it. I love trains, and so part of our authority allows us to study rail and do things in rail. And quite frankly, people are asking about rail in Kansas City. We have to give credit to the streetcar just for people thinking again about, well, that's not considered light rail or commuter rail. It got people thinking about, the permanence of it. Like I said, the whole Midwest is built on rail. You build the rail, the towns come, people come, the whole thing grows. So when you travel, if you go to DC, Denver, or wherever, you can catch the train from the airports to wherever you need to go. So our thing now is the demand's there, the interest is there, and if you're going to start, why not start now with that conversation again? So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just another follow-up on that. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I've seen all the light rail in many of the cities around the world that I've been in. But a lot of those are awfully supplemented.
Mhm.
They don't seem very successful. And how could we make this more or less better than those and not have to have so much subsidizing to make it work?
Well, it's just expensive. That's again not a very scientific answer. Most of your great infrastructure projects are generally subsidized by the federal government. We talk about capital projects, different things like that. Now, can you do what we call the public-private partnership, where you bring a private enterprise with the federal piece? Yeah, we're a quasi-government agency, so we can do private projects. In fact, I'm in DC next week. I'm having a meeting about doing more P3 projects, getting more private money in, maybe do some infrastructure cost, and even do a revenue capture where we can get revenue back to the KCATA to cover the cost of some of the stuff that we can do. Because again, at the end of the day, we're paid by taxpayers' dollars, so we got a higher fiduciary standard with the money, and we want to be transparent with that. So I think you can find a balance. I think sometimes we had actually a discussion this morning on project management, maybe having a private company project management, or there's basically built-in cost controls, so you don't have the overruns you see in a lot of federal projects or government projects in the past. So we're looking at all those things. I'm a big fan of P3 personally. I think there are efficiencies there that, quite frankly, we just don't do well. So let's find people who do it well and offload that and let us go for something we're good at.
I don't want to take all. So obviously I'm a huge. I did transportation in the Army, so I actually love the whole aspect, the strategic portions. So obviously, rail's just one aspect of the whole thing. You got airports, you got the connectivity, you got the Legends, you got Leavenworth, you got. We need an outer loop. Is there something in here that's tied all together? Is there some strategic plan that we haven't seen that will start linking us and not linking us with Wichita? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
I got digging earlier, so
yeah. Well, yeah. Sorry, my team's about to join the Big 12, so I'm excited. UCF. So, no, is there some kind of strategic plan that you're working within, or is that something that we could be aware of or should be aware of?
Yeah, we were just actually started last week our new strategic plan for the next 5 years. We brought in a company called InfraStrategies to help us cobble that together. So for the next 9 to 12 months, we're working on that. And part of that planning process does involve stakeholder outreach. So if you specifically want to be involved, you're more than welcome to give your contributions, but we will be reaching out to all the elected officials on both sides of the state line, as well as in DC as well, to get input on what they think we need to do. Because we're designed to go, like I said, the 7 counties on both sides of the line. We were built to have that strategy to put this thing together in a way. And quite frankly, until the last 7 years, we just didn't do it. And it's too competitive. There's too many things that we're trying to compete against to have a disjointed system that doesn't connect. It starts with the airport, obviously, but also from the airport, how do you get from the airport around the region? So some of that's funding, some of that's planning, some of that's just planning. We just dropped the ball, and now we got to pick it up and do it right.
And now you're talking about just for your piece of it. But so then what about the other parts, the highways and everything else, or is that part of the whole thing?
Well, no, we don't. That's what our friends at the dots,
right.
The highways and stuff. But anything that we call multimodal, airport, bikes, port. We work very close with Port KC. We're very close with Streetcar Authority. My view is anything that moves on the wheel is mine. And so it's in our footprint. We're basically demanded by Congress to own it. And so we're going to own it.
Yeah, that's always something that's very interesting to me is how to build it together. Right now, when one of the other representatives and I were in the Army, we talked about, we had drones that could carry 5,000 pounds. That we're not far from cars that fly.
Right.
So that's another set of highways. There's a lot of things out there, and all this stuff has to work together.
We've got our chief innovation guy. He's got some pretty cool stuff. Like yesterday, we were talking about hydrogen cells and buses. I mean, there's all these different things we're looking at. Grants available to do some different studies and things. But no, our job is to stitch it all together in a coherent way to make it basically seamless. So almost borderless, I guess, so I can describe it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Anybody? I've got a couple just real quick.
Okay.
So, as the majority leader just mentioned, the interface, the grand plan, is that something that Mark is more apt to come up with, or how's that interface with the regional?
Actually, it's funny. We used to do it before Mark did it, and then Mark took it over. But under our compact authority, we can do the same type of planning, the long-range planning, short-term planning. That's something I'm really pushing for the ATA to take the leadership role on that again. While we work very well with Mark, this airport plan I was telling you about is in conjunction with Mark. I just think anything that revolves transportation, moving people, come to us. I mean, we're the authority. So it's time we act like the authority on that. But I have nothing but highest regard for Mark and what they do. When they do plan it, we still got to implement it. So I think I told David Warren, if I got to cook the food, I should be able to buy the groceries. So why not plan it?
But still, there's a number of different entities. I mean, you need to work with KDOT as part of that.
Yes.
Overall regional planning.
Yes.
I know that's one of that last mile issue, I think, is one of the most important things when we talk about transit, getting people from the house to the pickup and then from the drop off to the work. Can you kind of help me understand a little bit better what micro transit is? Are you being a competitor with Uber, or what's micro transit?
Yeah, micro transit is basically it works in zones. So I'll use the one we just did with the city called Iris. So it's north of the river, and we've got 3 different zones or adjacent zones. And within that zone, you program your algorithm to say where you want to go with basically a 15 to 20 minute wait time. It could be app-based through your phone. For Title VI concerns, if you don't have access to a phone or mobile phone, you can call our customer service center to book a ride. And it'll take you everyone within that zone for Iris example, for $3. If you go to an adjacent zone, it's $4. If you want to go from that zone, say to the airport, it's $10. So microtransit is another way to address that first mile, last mile concern. also allows you to really be what we call community mobile. So you can be a bus, it can be a streetcar, it can be the micro transit vehicles. They're all ADA compliant. They can be vans, they can be buses, they can be 14 to 20-foot passenger buses. It's just another way to move people around more efficiently than sometimes, because it's not always going to be a 40 or 30-foot bus. So it's very much like Uber. The differences is with at least with micro transit through the KCATA, those drivers are bonded. Their license. There's a more of a safety issue addressed by doing it through our organization.
So a lot of times it will be a 4-passenger sedan or something
It could
like
be
that.
a range of cars. It's like when you Uber, you want like Uber X, Uber XL. I mean, you can request different types of passenger vehicles based on how many people you got.
And so another thing, you talked a lot about your park and ride concept for the large events. How do you shift your resources from what they're doing normally to like when you have a Super Bowl event? I guess by park and ride, you mean you set up, uh, you use a parking lot somewhere to get them to the event.
As an example, with
How
the
do you?
parade, we had Old Park Mall, Indian Springs, the old Indian Springs Shopping Center, Worlds of Fun, Truman Road parking lot on Truman across from Manual Tech. And then we had the Starlight Theater parking lot as well. And we direct people to park there. We'll have buses. So for the Super Bowl parade, we have about 225 buses, fixed route buses. We also rented out some school buses because school was out that day from a scale perspective. And we just move them in, come down to the park. They walk 2 or 3 blocks down to the parade. And then after the parade, they walk back to the buses. We take them back to where the pickup points were. So what we'll do for, like, say, the NFL draft, we already know that we need more buses. So we're going to just kind of shift more of our buses to our east-west routes, increase our max service headway times from about 20 minutes down, hopefully 10 for more consistency. Also bridging to the streetcar east-west, as well as also having the parking rides. Again, we might look at Hy-Vee Arena next time as another spot to pick up from. And if we need to add more, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other? Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Hey, Mr. Chair, just one last thing. I'm excited about the fact that you're talking about planning, because I've seen what's going on in DC and they're so far behind the power curve, right? You know, I was in Orlando where I grew up. 35 years it took to get I-4 where they don't have construction because they were always behind the power curve. This is the time. If we're going to start growing it, Wichita's, it's growing. We've got to make sure that we've got the plan in place before we start growing too big.
And I think people forget this. The transit piece is probably the easiest piece. It's the planning that's most important. So you have to know where you're going first to even get to where you got to go.
Okay, there's no further questions. Thank you very much, Mr. White, for coming and presenting today.
You Representative Francis. You have a good day.
So our next presenter is Matt Messina. He's with the Multimodal Transportation Bureau Chief at KDOT. Welcome to the committee, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Matt Messina. I work for KDOT as our Bureau Chief of Multimodal Transportation, which is where our Office of Public Transportation is housed. We also oversee our electric vehicle activities, including other alternative fuels, freight and rail programs, and bicycle and pedestrian activities. Mr. Chair, before I begin, would it be okay if I check to address Representative Proctor's question first? Would you be able to repeat it as well for me, please?
Well, I just was hoping to get some more details on what you're doing in Leavenworth. How many vehicles? What's kind of the program? What's the cost share? How much is each party paying, and all that?
Okay, so that level of detail I wouldn't be able to provide to you today. We handle that more on the application basis and administer the grants, and then from then on, the public transit manager and her staff actually handle the details of that. But it's something I could follow up and provide later. Okay, I'm going to give a high-level overview of what our Office of Public Transportation is involved with, which is mainly the administration of the federal and state funds that the DOT receives. We primarily serve as a point of contact for all of our state's transit providers, which is about 145 different agencies in Kansas. And we provide services in almost all 105 counties within the state. And on an annual basis, we're provided $11 million in state funds and about $20 million in federal funds. Not all of that is fully administered through KDOT. Some of those go directly to the urban transit providers, which they are well equipped to administer themselves. So on your handout, you have a couple breakdowns of our core programs that we handle and award funding to, starting out with our 5311 program funds, which is tailored to the 79 agencies that primarily provide rural transportation services. The 5310 program is a specialized service for elderly and disabled, and a lot of those also provide general public transportation with about 66 providers across the state. Like I mentioned earlier, and like Mr. White mentioned, we have strong working relationships with all the agencies across the state. Again, we primarily focus with providing technical support with the smaller providers and just have working relationships with the urban providers. Not all programs that we do provide meet the needs of the agencies. As you heard earlier, there are a lot of changing needs and advancements in technologies and even vehicles and equipment that can provide efficiencies for the agencies. However, they're not exactly well developed and enveloped within standard call for projects to administer grant funds. So we do develop something that's a little bit unique compared to other states, and that's the AIC program, which is a combination of transit funds that we combine together to allow for access, innovation, and collaboration for our transit agencies. And this is the pot of funds that's been really popular with administering grants to do feasibility studies for microtransit services and also piloting phases of microtransit services, such as in Johnson County and in Leavenworth. So each year we kind of get together as a group. We discuss with the Kansas Association of Public Transit and discuss current needs, trends, and kind of work a annual work plan to see what else we can provide, what sort of needs we need to be addressing. And we try and fit those into the eligibilities of this flexible program to help meet those needs. I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to address any questions if there are any.
We have any questions for Matt? Okay, Matt, I had one question. Are we maximizing our federal funds with our match? Or are we leaving anything on the table?
No, we turn down projects because we have a lot of demand out there.
Okay, so I mean, if we dedicated more federal funds, or excuse me, more state funds, we wouldn't be able to draw down like $2 or $3 federal dollars for each state dollar that we put in. We've maximized that.
Yeah. So
on the transit side, yes.
Yeah, if I'm understanding your question correctly, we maximize spending with leveraging all of our state funds to exhaust the available federal funds that aren't anything discretionary that we apply for in addition.
Right. So the standard money, we're maximizing that. Okay, I just wanted to make sure of that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Joel, would you be able to give a quick update on the Highway 69 Hot Lane project? Representative Delperdang did leave, but I know we've got a number of reps from the Kansas City area that might be interested in where we are on that project right now.
Sure, I can do my best to try and give the latest update. Again, Joel Skelly, Director of Policy here at KDOT. As Chairman Francis mentioned, we have let the project. We actually did a ceremonial groundbreaking. Due to the weather, we did it inside, so there was a lot of confetti that was thrown instead of dirt, but it was still a good opportunity to celebrate the project starting. We will be carrying out a lot of stuff that's not right on the highway. So a lot of dirt moving, earth moving, that sort of thing to begin with, utility relocation as we get ready to start laying the new lanes of pavement. So the lanes of pavement, there will be one in each direction, essentially between 151st Street and about 103rd or 435, essentially, where we're going to be utilizing the express lane, managed toll lane project infrastructure. So what's going to happen next is we will start once we get that earthwork moved. We'll start on the lanes. You'll probably notice some cones if you haven't already in some of the areas, and we will be progressing over the next essentially 2 construction seasons, this construction season and part of the next, to finish that project out ultimately with that operation, I believe, in 2020, late 2024, I believe, or no, 2025.
And I want to make sure the majority leader can hear this and that it's your ballpark instead of my ballpark. But do you remember what the original cost estimate on that project was approximately?
That's a really good question that I'd have to look. I don't
think it was
remember
as
if it was in the,
365 million.
I think we were north of that. I think it was closer to the mid 400s, but I'd have to confirm that.
I think that was after the changes that were requested by the neighbors because of sound concerns and things like that.
And that could be correct. I'd have to confirm.
And maybe you could confirm that for the majority leader as we talk about inflation and how it's affecting like the transportation budget. What did that project eventually let for? Do you remember that number?
Over 6. I think it was about 6.5, just under 6.5, I believe. I think 630. And yes, to your point, Chairman Francis, we, over the last 2 years, essentially the last two construction season lettings, essentially we've been seeing upwards of 40% inflationary cost increases to our bids. And we've even done a comparison to make sure that it's comparable items, not just like, okay, this project was this much and this project was this much more the next year. It was based on comparable things like our materials, say aggregate or the pavement, those sorts of things. We're comparing like to make sure that we're understanding better and not just saying, you know what, it's this project had a different type of scope. It's actually comparable items.
Yeah, and I just want to bring everybody's attention to how quickly we see the money that goes into KDOT, but sometimes I don't think we can really understand the cost of some of those projects to bring them to completion. Representative Goddard, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do, but I don't want to detract from this conversation if we're not done with it yet.
I'm done with it.
Okay.
Well, wait.
Thank you. My question has to do with recent announcements on some pretty significant development projects, economic development, DeSoto with the Panasonic plant, Cherryville with the soy plant, and now Burlington with the chip plant. Has there been much movement on preparation for handling the additional traffic and maybe construction that's going to be required to allow those projects to go forward and flourish?
So, Representative, great question, and the answer simply is yes. So once we learn about the projects, and fortunately for us, especially like with the Panasonic project, we were in the know a little earlier on to help kind of start evaluating that. But as Mr. White had mentioned, and I think as Matt had mentioned as well, from the beginning, we are working with those folks, with the communities, with the development to make sure that we are addressing the needs as they see it, as well as we see it. So we start doing projections based on, okay, here's the number of jobs that are coming in. And it also includes, okay, here's the number of trucks that may be coming in or going out. Not so much people that are just working, but actually the folks that are actually carrying the commodity or the product to and from the location, to make sure that we are adequately addressing those needs. Because again, we want to make sure that the system is robust enough to make sure that we carry those individuals and the products safely. That's the biggest thing. We want to make sure it's safe and efficient as far as our operations go. So yeah, from the beginning, as soon as we find that out, we start that dialogue, start our engineers and our planners start looking at, okay, what are our current traffic models showing based on the current traffic flow, and then what the projection would be based on, okay, here's what what the project is ultimately planning to bring in. And we're able to work through, okay, they're going to open in this date, but in the meantime, they're going to have this number of construction folks possibly coming in. We've got to address that if we've got other materials or needs to help do those things. And then once they have final or first build out, it could be different from final build out. They may open with a smaller subset of the group that they ultimately expand to in a few years. So that is also built into that planning mechanism to make sure that we're trying to address those needs.
If I may, I imagine it's very difficult to have everything come together at the same time, ready to help service the economic development project or whatever. I know that there are a lot of things. Times the project will move faster than we can as a state in terms of preparing the infrastructure to service the facility.
And that's a good point. There are times where we are slightly behind just because of the fact that it takes amount of time to get those projects actually designed. But we are working at the pace that we can, and we do accelerate things in some cases as much as we can to meet those needs. There are some things that we just can't move quite as quickly as others, especially when it comes to right of way in some cases. But I would say that really a true benefit to what you all passed out a couple of years ago, the Ike program, really has allowed us to be a lot more responsive to those needs as these things emerging developments come up. In previous programs, transportation programs we've had, we may not have been able to be as responsive as far as like timeliness or the ability to even carry out those projects just because of other commitments that we had previously made at the beginning of the program. We learned. And so under Ike, we really have set up a great process that it allows us to have a rolling program to be more responsive when things emerge. We go out every 2 years to talk with local consultation, to talk with our locals, and they can bring in, okay, we have economic development opportunities coming. So then we can then help talk with them, talk with the development potentially, and say, what are those needs? And ultimately, it has allowed us to be a little more responsive. Case in point, the BNSF intermodal there in Johnson County, had that not happened when it did, had that happened a couple years later, we may not have been able to respond as we did to build that infrastructure to really bring that to fruition. So that was just something that would really kind of stuck in our mind as we then developed and worked with you all to build out the Ike program.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I wanted to ks.gov. Thank you guys for taking on that leadership role of taking back from Mark and kind of developing a master plan for us for this area. That's great. And that's the same thing for you. Is what I'm hearing you say, though, is a lot of you've been freed up to react to things. And I saw your 101 plan. I've gone through that. But here's the question is who's out there thinking 10 years in advance or 15 years? Do you guys have a team that does that? And what is that product so that these folks here could understand that?
Sure. So I think to a large extent, actually, Matt represents part of it in our planning and multimodal groups, where they are actually looking at traffic demand models that are projecting out 30 years. When we go out and talk with our local consultation groups or across the state, we're asking them what they're seeing. So we're trying to be proactive in the fact that we are looking to say what might be coming. But at the same time, like you said, reactive. We need to be able to be reactive to something because business, oftentimes private business, if not all the time, moves a lot faster than state government or federal government. So we are trying to, I think, turn that, I think, a bit and say we have private sector principles or public sector principles with private sector urgency. So we're trying to, again, be that strong fiduciary agency to make sure that we're using this appropriate amount of state dollars, taxpayer dollars, to meet those needs, but in a timely fashion. So we do develop plans ultimately from across the state as far as what we're looking to try and accomplish to make sure that our transportation system is, again, robust and healthy. I think the bigger piece for us at a state level is being a good listener to the locals when it comes down to those sorts of economic development projects, and at the same time planning for our preservation of our system, because that's key. If we don't preserve our system, we run into problems trying to build out more if we're not actually being strategic in what we're building out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree. And that, like you have 69 highway you're talking about, you got 169 highway, you got the highway out to Liberal, you need to get the 4 lanes going into there. Because honestly, I mean, and then the autonomous lanes as we're moving across on 70. I mean, this is what drives our state. So, I mean, it's really important. That's why I really was curious about that 15-year plan. And if we don't, really would like to see us getting somewhere where we're doing that, because you'll drive a lot more and then you're reacting less. And then you're reacting to small stuff. So I think we fixed that problem, but it's the more strategic thing I'm very interested in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And by the way, Majority Leader, thank you for the shout out for Highway 54. So I'm going to pass it on a little bit and talk about a bridge that we need in Leavenworth, Representative Proctor. I don't want you to feel forgotten over there.
Mr. Chair, I was going to try to get through a whole briefing with KDOT without asking about the bridge,
But
but
I wanted to make sure you got your, anyway. Thank you guys for all the work that you do. I know everybody has an important engagement that they're 20 minutes late to, but I do think understanding the future of transportation in our state is very important. So if there's nothing further for the committee, please remember we're meeting Monday. We're going to try to work some bills, have a hearing. And if there's nothing further, we're adjourned. Thank you.